Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host, Brett
Gilliland. Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Tracy Hannigan with me. Tracy, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you very much. It's dark and cold here in the UK today, but glad to be here.
Well, that's good. We had a couple days where it literally rained for about 40 straight hours, just nonstop this week. But now it's been it's beautiful. We got 55 degrees, basically almost 60 degrees in November in St. Louis, Missouri area. We'll take it.
It sounds like a heat wave to me.
How cold is it there?
Well, I don't know what the Fahrenheit conversion is anymore. I used to have difficulty converting it to Celsius, and now I can't convert it back. It's about 16 well, no, that's a hot day. It's about 12 degrees today.
Okay. Well, hopefully it'll be getting warm here in the next few months for you. But you are a qualified sleep therapist recognized by the Society of Behavioral Sleep Medicine. You use evidence-based approaches such as CBTI and ACTI and others. You help adults regain restorative sleep and develop sleep resilience that lasts a lifetime. So we're going to have a great discussion with that. And you state here that people can relearn to sleep well despite being in pain or being perimenopausal, no matter how long they've had insomnia. So I think you're going to help a lot of people today on the Circuit of Success. But before we dive into that, Tracy, what has helped make you the woman that you are today?
Oh, gosh. Well, I suppose with all of us, our life experiences influence both our personal interests and our professional interests. I think as a young person, the challenges of deep personal loss, bereavement, later on, my own issues with insomnia have led to almost like a personal development journey, which ended up not only helping with my sleep, but with pretty much everything else in my life, my sense of direction, my sense of purpose. And I call this feeling in myself like my mortality motivation. We've got a limited amount of time here, and I want to make the absolute most of it.
I love that. So you had your own sleep issues, kind of dove into it. Was it more as a passion and then it turned into a career, or how did that work?
Well, after that bereavement, of course, any bereavement, we would expect to have some sleep disruption. That's quite normal, but it went on and on and on and on. And at this point, I was working full time. I went back to do a degree. I did a degree in psychology and then worked in community mental health. So I'd gotten through my first sleep issue kind of on my own. I wasn't sure how I did it until I went through my second one. But working in community mental health, seeing the bidirectional relationship between mental health issues and sleep, it was just so obvious. Became very interested in it. Moved to the UK, retrained and worked in pain clinic settings. And again, sleep issues, very, very common, and had gone through a second bout of insomnia myself, actually sought some support and assistance, and was really impressed by the evidence base around these particular approaches that nobody seemed to know about. The doctors, if they read the guidelines, they might know about these approaches, but they don't tend to get prescribed because they are time intensive and not as easy to deliver as prescribing a medication, for example. So I decided I'm going to learn more about this. I'm going to do some further training in sleep, and then began doing that work shortly before the pandemic. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, everybody was at home, lots of sleep issues. I went online and been doing it full time since then.
Amazing. How powerful is sleep? I mean, if you look at whether we eat healthy, we exercise, there's all these things, right? Drink a lot of water. There's a million things, not a million, but there's 5 or 10 key things that we can do. But most would argue, or some would argue, that sleep may be the most important one. Would that be a fair statement to say?
I think sleep is a very important one. When it starts to become a slippery slope, particularly for people who aren't sleeping well, to say sleep is the most important one. Because if people aren't sleeping well, the first thing that they try to do is they try to fix it, because our human brain wants to fix what we perceive as a problem. The problem is that we can't force sleep to happen. And people invest a lot of energy in trying to control sleep, which actually makes sleep worse over time. So when we're talking about the importance, a lot of people talk about health issues, when they're talking about nutrition and exercise and all these other kinds of things that are also pillars of kind of a healthy, happy life.
Yeah.
We take our eye off of those things. I would also add social engagement and social interaction in that list of things that are really important for our well-being, physically and mentally. We tend to take our eyes off of those things exclusively and focus on sleep, 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 and disengage from those other things, which are very important. And literally, those are the things that we can control. We can't control sleep. We can influence it. We can try to help it. But we can look at how we eat. We can look at how much we're moving. We can look at who we're hanging around with and how much social interaction we get. All of those things. If we look at those as kind of 4 pillars, those are the 3 things we can directly influence and control on a daily basis.
What would you say the top 3? I'm going to just pick the number 3 out of the air, but what are the top 3 pointers to help everyone sleep better?
They would be a little different for people who are sleeping well and people who are not sleeping well. So I'm going to angle them a little bit toward people who are having wobbly sleep, because they're probably the people who are the most interested.
And define wobbly sleep, if you will.
Sorry?
I said define that. When you say wobbly sleep, let's just kind of lay the groundwork for what that means to people so they can define it themselves, but we'll be on the same page as them.
Yeah. When I'm talking about wobbly sleep, I'm talking about insomnia, which is difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up early, not due to another sleep disorder. There are over 85 of them. So it's kind of important to know which one is the issue.
Wow.
And you can have insomnia and other sleep disorders at the same time. But wobbly sleep would be commonly kind of after an event where something has happened and there's a natural sleep disruption, but the sleep disruption keeps going. That's a very common scenario. So in a situation like that, we are very tempted with our brain that wants to control everything to kind of look at our devices and our watches and have them tell us lots of information. That is because we feel vulnerable and afraid of not getting enough sleep. It's our brain's attempt to control the situation. So my number one suggestion that's safe for everybody is, if you're having wobbly sleep, don't obsess about the numbers and tracking your sleep. That would be number one. Number 2 thing would be, contrary to common, quote unquote, common sense and the most common advice, if you're having difficulty sleeping, don't go to bed early. Don't stay in bed late trying to get an extra few minutes of sleep. Because what happens is people lay in bed for 2-3 hours on either end, and that is not made up of sleep. And that worsens sleep over time. It's called time in bed extension. You can induce insomnia in healthy sleepers by asking them to stay in bed for much longer than they're actually sleeping. So the temptation is there because we keep hearing this from well-meaning friends and relatives, but don't go to bed early and don't have a lie-in in order to recuperate sleep. You can do that occasionally if you don't have kind of ongoing sleeping issues, but in the long term, ongoing sleeping issues will be made worse by doing that. And I would say a third thing that is becoming more and more common and more kind of brought to the fore is be careful where you seek support for your sleeping issues. There are a lot of quote unquote support groups online that are actually quite unhelpful for people. Surround yourself with people who are interested in life and living life and all of the good things. If you spend a lot of time in a quote unquote support group where everybody is competing to the bottom and who takes more medication, who sleeps worse, and I sleep worse than you, that is not going to do you any good. So I suggest that people steer clear of those spaces. I have one of those spaces online, but the tone is very different than that. Because it's so important actually to to get past the point of focusing exclusively on a sleeping problem to focusing on other things. That is actually what helps people in the long run. And of course, social media keeps us involved, but not always the most helpful way.
What is it? I'll just be vulnerable here and share. So sometimes I do this. I would consider myself a pretty good sleeper. Once I fall asleep, if you ask my wife, I fall asleep pretty darn quickly, and then I stay asleep, which is great, and I'm very thankful for that. But there's those random nights where, and I just had one. I think it was Sunday night. There was nothing I was stressed about. There was nothing going on. I read my book before bed, like down in my family room. I did the stuff that I wanted to do that day. It was a good day, but I just laid there and I tossed and turned and tossed and turned. I felt like I didn't sleep at all the entire night. So what is it? Sometimes you have the good sleep, sometimes you don't. And are there things that we can do to help ourselves fall asleep?
Sleep is really variable all the time. It's just that we notice it more if we're paying attention to it. There isn't necessarily going to be a specific identifiable reason for a night like that. If it keeps going on, things that we can do to help with the falling asleep element, this would be different if you have a different kind of insomnia picture. So waking up at night kind of picture or an early morning awakening picture. One of the best things that can help improve falling asleep, if there's no anxiety present, is simply looking at the structure of someone's sleep. Now, this isn't an intervention appropriate for everyone, so you've got to check with your provider about this, but a little bit of time in bed restriction. Instead of spending 9 hours in bed and having very light, fluffy, tossy-turny sleep, it might be appropriate for some people to contract the amount of time that they're actually spending in bed to maybe 8 hours, which will deepen their sleep. And waking up consistently at the same time every day can help smooth out some of those wobbly kind of those weeks where we just have some nights that are really kind of and some nights that are good. We want to resist the temptation to then sleep in or sleep longer. Creating that kind of consistency anchors the building of sleep drive, which is a biological part of our sleep, our circadian rhythm, which is another biological part of our sleep. And that can create enough consistency that we relax a little bit about what's happening with the sleep itself.
How important is the magic number 8, right? Is that 8 hours? Does everybody have to get 8 hours to be healthy, or what's that look like?
Great question. The 8-hour myth, I like to bust this one. Sleep need is genetically determined. It's a little bit different for everybody. 8 became kind of a common number, because if you're looking at a bell curve, the people bang in the middle of the bell curve for sleep will be between 7 and 9 hours. And of course, what is the middle of that number? That is 8 hours. But that doesn't mean that people who are getting 6 hours might be appropriate for some people. 7 hours might be appropriate for some people. 9 hours might be appropriate. 10, 11 hours might. When you start getting beyond 10 or below that, you start going, maybe there is something else going on there. But it's not helpful for people who sleep less than that 8-hour number to try to get 8 hours if 8 hours is not the number for them. And so how do people know what that number is a question that often comes up. And whatever amount of sleep you need to be able to fall asleep within 5 to 20 minutes, usually. We don't want it faster than 5 minutes. And if 20 minutes to 30 minutes is questionable, but that 5 to 20 minute mark, to wake up a couple of times in the night, long enough to remember it, and then to be able to fall back to sleep relatively easily. So you're spending a little bit of time awake in the night, but not a lot. And to wake up, and once you get going in the morning, to have enough physical and mental energy to do what you need to do during the day. So for some people, that's 7 hours. For some people, that's 9 hours.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because I find when I sleep more, I'm actually more groggy during the day.
Me too. Me
Huh.
too. Absolutely. And when it's tempting, I'm an early bird.
Okay.
So I love the summer, and living in the UK, we're at a much higher latitude than when I was living in the States. And so it's broad daylight at like 4:30 in the morning in the middle of the summer. And I love it.
Ooh.
I'm up. I'm ready to rock and roll. But I'm also terrible at a party because like I want to be in bed between 8:30 and 9 o'clock.
That's funny.
um,
See, I'm the opposite. I'm a night owl.
Yeah, so is my 20-year-old. I mean, he stays up to hours that I wouldn't, if I was anywhere near the house, I would just be asleep.
Yeah. Crazy.
So we've all got a slightly different timing to those numbers of hours as well. In the darkness, because now it's darker. It's about 4:15 in the afternoon here, and it's dark outside. Um, I find it a little harder to get going in the morning, and I'm more tempted to spend more time in bed, and my sleep gets thinner and lighter in the winter because of that, because I end up spending more time in bed. Now I notice this, and if I'm dissatisfied with it, then I'll just tighten that up and make sure that I don't lounge around quite so much. That's the opposite problem of somebody who is satisfied, circling back to the previous issues, who's satisfied with 7, really, but they hear 8 is the magic number.
Yeah.
The harder they try to achieve that 8 by spending more time in bed or by suddenly creating all of these rituals around sleep to try to make more sleep happen, that person's vulnerable to giving themselves insomnia when they didn't have it in the first place. I like to say that sleep's a little bit like love. The more you try to hammer it and turn it into a specific shape and look a specific way, the more likely that is to backfire. Sleep is much like it.
Got it. Why is it the brain is always racing at night? Is it because the kind of the day's over and there's nothing else going on? But for those of us that have a racing brain sometimes, how do we control that? And then what do we do about it?
Yeah, it's really common when we don't have anything else on our minds, particularly busy people like ourselves, the day to bleed right into the night. It's almost like the brain is saying, hey, don't forget this, don't forget that. Ooh, now we have time to think about this. And it's not so much a problem with the brain, because the brain is designed to create thoughts and to throw them out there to us. There's 2 issues that create a problem with our natural brain function doing that. One is that it's not kind of trained to do it in a compartment that's suitable for us, which is, i.e., the daytime. So we can train it to do that, to be more likely to do that. And the second thing that happens with this racing brain element is like our brain isn't actually fully awake in the middle of the night or, in those wee hours. And so it's not helpful time. The more we try to kind of squash that under the surface, the more it's bound to bounce back up. We want to be able to relate to that part of our brain that thinks it's doing us a favor by throwing all this stuff at our attention. We have to create a new relationship with it that basically says, this is not the time to be doing this. Thank you very much. I'm not at my best. I know I have to solve this, but now isn't it? And the ways that people work with that can vary really dramatically. It really depends on the person. It essentially requires separating from the emotional content of the thinking, which is a skill that's best developed during the daytime. But a shortcut can be finding something more neutral to think about. And I encourage people to go through a process of cultivating that relationship with that part of their brain. It's saying, don't forget to do this. Don't forget to do that. Like, thank you very much. Appreciate your help. But now isn't the time. I'm going to go pay attention to something else and pick something more neutral to think about. Or wake up your executive function that is half asleep by getting up and doing a lap of the house and then coming back and getting into bed. I would say repressing it is probably going to backfire, but learning to massage it and manage it so that it's more helpful to us is really the route forward with that. I've got the issue with the racing brain too. So I know various things that are helpful for me. The framework for thinking about a racing brain or anxiousness in bed almost requires us to take our eye off of the impact on sleep to be successful. And the same thing applies to things like sleep hygiene. Once people have an internally developed issue with sleep, like they're anxious about sleep and that's what's making them not sleep, you can have the darkest room in the world. You can have the quietest room in the world. None of that is going to impact a problem that's coming from the inside out, right? Most of my clients have better sleep hygiene than I do. So we have to turn inward for these things. And again, if we're trying to force sleep to happen, even through doing totally neutral things, like the difference between pulling the blind to keep the light out or like taping the blind to the wall to keep every photon out. There's a big difference in mindset between those two people. The second person is terrified of the light affecting their sleep. The underlying piece to that is they're terrified of not sleeping. And long-term sleep resilience, obviously I like to help people sleep in the short term, but resilient sleep that can roll with the variability that is inherent in sleep comes from dropping the fear and the frustration with being awake at night.
Well, I love that because what this is making me feel is like it's more gamifying it almost. Like I'm a very competitive person and pretty driven and I think about results, right? And so when I'm having those nights of sleep, I'm putting more pressure on myself, right? Like, oh my gosh, you're not getting this sleep. You're not doing this. And it's like versus being like, dude, relax. It's going to be okay. You've had a night like this before and try to get through that process and not put so much pressure on it. Probably then eliminates a lot of stress that then allows you to fall asleep. Fair?
Yes. And even if you don't sleep in that evening or that hour or that minute, you're physically calmer, you're mentally calmer, you're emotionally calmer, and you have a better relationship in air quotes developing with being in a situation that you're not happy with. And that is what creates that sleep resilience. It's interesting. The word that comes to mind with what you're describing is almost like a perfectionism, right? And it's really, really common in the people that I work with, and being a recovering perfectionist myself, that's our brain trying to be like, everything's got to be, it's a defense against anxiety. The anxiety that comes when we go, I can just back off and take my hands off it and everything's going to be all right. Whereas our first instinct is, I got to make it a certain way for it to be all right. And we can't make sleep be a certain way. So we have to change the frame, which is, how can I just put myself in a different place? So if the rating scale of success with these sorts of interventions is like a 1 to 10, the 10 can't be, I sleep perfectly for 8 hours. 10 has to be, I have a calmer relationship with not sleeping at night when I would prefer to be asleep. So it's almost like a mindset shift really, really helps this process.
That's a game changer. That's like a light switch for me of like, because I do that with so many different other areas of my life of like telling myself and talking myself off the ledge, right? But then I don't do it with sleep. So I think I could just end the podcast right now and be done. We got it. Everybody's got it, right?
Funny, we have a different relationship with things outside of us and inside of us. We think that if it's inside of us, we should just be able to snap our fingers and sort it out. Right. Weirdly, it's actually harder to do that with things inside of us.
Weird how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
Talk about meditation before sleep and how powerful that is. I'm a big meditator and I do it a lot at night before bed and either sometime in the morning or throughout the day. But meditation and sleep preparation, what's that look like?
Right. I'm not a formal meditator, but I am a massive fan of any kind of mindfulness practice, which you could potentially meditation into that camp. And the fact that you do it during the day probably makes it helpful at night. What is problematic with some people is not meditating itself, but I'm going to learn how to meditate and I'm going to do this very specific thing for 30 minutes before bed because I believe it will put me to sleep, because that puts pressure on the situation. So it's not actually the meditation itself that creates an issue. And it's unfortunate because then people say, well, it didn't work, when actually the application was the issue rather than the tool. I think anything that can help us drop and separate from the busyness of the day and help create a compartment that is just ours is helpful. We can actually practice that throughout the day, whether we're meditating during the day, like, or, before we begin our day. You said in the morning, I love that. What do most people do, who, particularly the self-employed, do when they wake up in the morning? They pull their phone out from underneath their head or their pillow, and they open up their emails, right? And maybe they sit there and they try to type out a reply. If you're like me, you don't type on your phone very well. So then you sit there and you think about it for a couple of hours while you're trying to do your workout and you shower and get the kids ready and all that stuff. And then you sit down. Well, what a way to make the morning miserable.
Absolutely.
I really love the idea of filling your cup before you present yourself to the world, because everybody's going to want a little piece of your cup throughout the day. You have to give from your cup all day long. And I think it's a great way to start the day. And anything like that, whether it's meditating, whether it's I'm not going to check my email, I'm going to take my shower first, or I'm going to go for a walk and then come back into the house and have my coffee and then sit down. Anything that creates division and compartments where we can have a busy brain and a not busy brain helps with sleep, because we have to make that switch at night as well. I like it after dinner is a really important one.
Yeah, it's funny you're talking like this, because I 1,000% agree. And I talk about my Focus 90. And the Focus 90 is the first 90 minutes of your day focusing on the things that move the needle in whatever areas that are important to you in your life. And checking email, checking social media, all that stuff, that's not, in my opinion, should not be on the Focus 90 list of things to do, right? And so, because we think about it, like if I can win the first 90 minutes of my day, I'm going to win, right? I'm going to win the day. And if I can win and stack enough winning days, I'm going to win in life is the ultimate goal, right? And however you define winning. But I think that's the key point that I think some people miss out. To your point, they get up, they get on their phones, and their day starts, and they start dealing with everybody else's freaking problems, quite honestly, right? It's like, deal with the stuff that's important to you, get yourself right, then go deal with everybody else's problems.
Particularly social media. I mean, it's a tool we can use to enrich our lives, but most people end up being used by it, and they start their morning with this dopamine hit, dopamine hit, dopamine hit. Yeah. And of course, the rest of the day is going to be like, ooh, nothing can compare it to that. But I can tell you that the first couple, particularly being, it's a bit unfair. I'm a morning person. It's my best time of day anyway. The first 3 hours of my day, I can get more done in 3 of those blocks first thing in the day, than if I had focused time for the entire week, didn't have to have client calls or anything. I would still get more done in those 3 hours than I would the rest of the week. So some of it's about knowing your own energy and how it flows. Some people can want that 3 hours at between 3 and 6 p.m. That's just not me. But I like to be centered in the morning. And I find that just putting myself into a position where I'm being responsive or looking at Facebook, especially recently. And it's like, you just don't need all of the bombardment, the news, the input, start the day giving energy where you want to give it and give it to yourself before going there.
Amen to that. So let's see if we can get you to open up a little bit about your process. So you being the sleep expert that you are, my first question is, where is this thing? If you're watching, you can see it's my phone. But so I got my phone out here. Where is this thing when you're going to bed at night? Where is this going?
I am so excited to talk about this, because this is another amazing myth I get to bust on your show.
I love it. I can't wait to hear it.
So I will occasionally fall asleep with the phone falling on my face.
Yeah, I've been there, done that.
Yeah. Cat videos and humorous things and knitting stuff. And my feed is curated so that it's kind of a joyful, purposeful thing for me. Yes. So I enjoy doing that. And a lot of people are horrified, like, oh, you're not supposed to look at screens for hours before you go to bed. But if you actually look at the research, way back when they started looking at artificial light and sleep parameters of different kinds, they're like, oh yeah, device light, particularly bright device light, so laptops, for example, If you use a laptop for 5 hours, one study, 5 hours before sleep time, it delays your dim light melatonin onset by an hour and a half. So everybody said, oh, well, so devices must be really bad for your sleep. But what they didn't actually do was measure people's sleep. So they didn't actually look at the sleep itself. So as the research evolved, they started looking at this. And yes, bright light has an impact on melatonin onset. That impact is less if people get good light during the day. But the actual impact of that light on people's ability to fall asleep is, if you look at the exposed groups versus control groups of different kinds, it's under 10 minutes difference.
Wow.
So there's no real functional difference, even though there's a difference in the onset, dim light melatonin onset, which everybody's worried about blue light and melatonin. Yeah. So then we moved to where I had been as well for a while. So it's not the light, it's the excitingness of the stuff that's on the screen. So they studied this too. They studied groups of young adults, boys, because they're slightly less variable than girls are, particularly as young adults. And they looked at first-person shooter, people playing games for hours before bed, and then they looked at people doing math, and then they looked at people, compared to doing watching documentaries, and groups of people just going straight to bed. Almost no difference, like something like 7 minutes difference. Wow. Between 7, 8 minutes. It's basically under 10, almost negligible.
Almost irrelevant.
Almost irrelevant. For the people who are terrified about not falling asleep, they're worried about those 10 minutes. But, the anxiety piece is a bigger problem there. And the self-shaming over looking at your phone before bed is a bigger problem than the actual device light or what you're looking at. They did the same with cliffhanger movies. They looked at cliffhanger movies, and I can't remember what the control group was with that particular study, but the cliffhanger people fell asleep 5 minutes before the other people. I mean, it doesn't seem to have an impact, which raises a great question about our assumption of the power of this dim light melatonin onset on sleep. And some people say, well, if you're just looking at how fast people fall asleep, you're missing the bigger picture. There's still a lot of research to be done. But when they looked at the video game groups of young gents playing video games, very kind of, engaged activity. Yeah, all those things that I never wanted my son to play, but he eventually ended up playing. You're looking at, I think they said 1.6 or 1.7 more arousals in an overnight sleep study. And an arousal is not being awake, staring at the ceiling. An arousal in that definition is they rolled over 1.7 times more than the other group did. So that we really, everybody says, and I have probably said myself in the past, be careful about screen use, before I really knew what the research had to say. And so my advice now is, if you like cat videos, great. If you know you're sensitive to zombies, don't probably look at zombies. But other than that, the anxiety about what you're doing at night, the strict rules around what you're doing at night, denying yourself something that's important to you at night is probably more of an issue than what you're actually doing. Now, that's not to say that social media dependency isn't an issue. Particularly social media at night, if they did find that using devices for algorithmically influenced things to kind of suck people in, there are certain people who are more prone to having interruptions in their sleep because they're staying up past when they could otherwise sleep.
Yes.
Because they're into it. And the question being looked at now is, did people's sleep difficulties precede nighttime use of social media, or was it the other way around? And actually, initially, it looks like it's probably a little bit of both. People are staying up on social media, but they're also on social media because they can't sleep. So there's a lot more work to do on that. But I would say, if you like to look at cat videos just be careful it doesn't fall on your eye or leave a bruise. That's probably the biggest risk.
We've all done that before. It'll kind of get your attention pretty quickly, doesn't it?
It does.
But I think it
Right
does. It does. I think it can. The downside to it, and I agree with the light. And I even can do the blue light glasses, or you can just put it on your phone with different, eyes, so it's not so much blue light. But I think it does. Where I think it impacts is you can get in the vicious cycle of just keep, one more flip of the thumb, right, and it just keeps going. Now all of a sudden it's midnight when you should have been in bed maybe at 10:30. You just wasted an hour and a half of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you enjoy it, and I get it, you enjoy the cat video, you enjoy the whatever, and that's fine. But sometimes we just got to have the discipline to put the phone away.
Yeah, and for people who have difficulty with that discipline, so say waking up in the night and then immediately grabbing the phone and starting scrolling, they're not giving themselves an opportunity to get back to sleep. Basically, they're waking up and they're craving something to fill the gap, and they're reaching for their phone because it's a dopamine hit and it's addictive, essentially. For those people, I suggest they work on those boundaries around social media during the day so that they don't have that perceived need to reach for the phone, and to put a few hoops to jump through if they actually want to reach for the phone. Like, if you have to go get it out of the drawer downstairs in the kitchen, you might think twice about how much you really, really want to be scrolling on your phone at night.
Yeah. Good points. Yeah. Good points. What about, I don't take melatonin or anything like that, but you hear people and these experts on, social media talk about melatonin and how many milligrams and this and that. What do you recommend for people for that? Whether they have good or bad sleep problems or not, do you still recommend melatonin?
Yeah, that's another really interesting one, because if you look at any of the guidelines for the treatment of insomnia, melatonin is not an indication. Melatonin is a hormone that helps regulate the circadian system. So it's recommended for jet lag. I use it for jet lag when I come back from the States to the UK, because I like to hit the ground running and be up at a reasonable time and kind of get myself sorted out. And so I have a bit of a protocol for myself. Melatonin is not available over the counter here in the UK. It's prescription only. My recommendations, if people feel compelled to take melatonin, to recognize that the brain only, that dim light melatonin onset we were talking about, it's like picograms worth of melatonin. So half a milligram is going to be more than enough. And if people are saying, I took a 20 milligram melatonin and I fell asleep in 5 minutes, I will say that is the power of the placebo effect, because it does not work that way. It's not a sleeping pill. And it wouldn't function that fast anyway. If people want to take something like that, given that it's relatively unregulated in Canada and the United States, to try to buy something that is third-party tested, so at least you know what you get. There have been a couple of really big studies based on over-the-counter supplements in the States and Canada, where they might say they have 5 milligrams, per tablet in the bottle, but they've actually got none, and they've got serotonin in there, which would be dangerous for some people to take, or they've got 300 times the amount of active ingredient. You just don't know what you're getting. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. There are some populations where, and I would have to double check all of the details, but there are some populations who do not produce the melatonin that people outside that population would. So melatonin is used in neurodivergent children with autism in particular. Should be prescribed by a pediatric sleep specialist to get the kind of the dosing and particularly the timing right. That's what people miss out a lot on melatonin. People with certain chronic health conditions, and also women over 55, a couple of interesting studies, women over 55, there are some women in that age group who do seem to benefit from an appropriately timed kind of small dose of melatonin. But yeah, you got to talk to a provider that knows what they're doing with that kind of thing.
Good. Well, thank you for that feedback. It's very helpful. Naps, good, bad?
I actually love my naps. 22 minutes really does it for me. There's no magic in that. It's just what my partner and I have kind of come up with. We occasionally look at the diary and say, do we have a nap gap in there anywhere? Because I do my calls in the bedroom. But I don't have sleeping issues. So if people have difficulty falling asleep or they're waking up in the middle of the night, the general advice is to not take a nap because we don't want to dent the sleep drive. But of course, if you have to nap because of safety reasons, then by all means do. Just to take the edge of the sleepiness off. It's not advised to nap in order to accumulate a certain number of hours. So if you take a nap, generally you want to set an alarm. If you're taking a nap and it's 20 minutes, that's one thing. If you're taking a nap and it's 2 hours long, you're probably going to have an impact on your sleep.
Okay. It's good to know. I haven't napped, I bet, in 20 years. I can't even believe, probably back in college, probably 20 plus years ago. So, but just curious, because a lot of people will do that. And isn't it true you can't make up your sleep? Like if I think I need my 6 or 7 hours of sleep and I only got 4 last night, I can't just go to bed and catch up the 2 hours and be back to normal, right? Don't I always have that deficit or not?
There's a lot of research and a lot of debate around that. The people who pay the most attention to that particular issue are people who get very low levels of sleep.
Okay.
And if you do the calculation, you're just not alive long enough to catch up if that actually worked that way. So there's probably a limited ability to kind of catch up. It's probably not related so much to quantity as it is to quality. But what I would say is the brain prioritizes the kind of sleep that it needs. So if people aren't sleeping well, and they have an opportunity to take a nap, or they have a night where they are sleeping a little bit better, the brain, if it needs slow wave sleep, it's going to go for slow wave sleep. If it needs REM sleep, it's going to spend more time in REM sleep. As long as people are not taking things that interfere with REM sleep or slow wave sleep. So alcohol is a common one for people who don't fall asleep very well. It really wreaks havoc. It wreaks havoc with people's sleep. There are certain medications. Ironically, some sleeping medications also disrupt certain parts of sleep as well.
Isn't that amazing? Well, this is awesome. I really appreciate it, Tracy. What's the best place for people to reach out to you? Because I know that you do a free 20-minute chat, and then I think you have some online courses and stuff, right? Can you explain a little bit about those things?
Yeah, I do primarily one-to-one work, doing sleep therapy for adults. People can book a free chat with me to see if it's appropriate for them. I call it a 3 heads test. They can make sure I don't have 3 heads and vice versa. Just basically make sure I can help, because I don't work with people that I can't help. I want to refer them someplace that's appropriate. Yeah. I do have a do-it-yourself online course that is going to be, it's available on the website. It's going to be completely revamped, and I will be having more of a group style coaching available in the new year, and some other kind of exciting stuff coming up. Some mini courses, including on things like how to stop scrolling on social media.
It's a good one.
And similar related topics using some of my other qualifications, because they do intersect with sleep.
That's awesome. And what's the website again?
That's tracythesleepcoach.co.uk. And people can also find me on Instagram at Tracy the Sleep Coach, and on YouTube at Tracy the Sleep Coach.
And Tracy.
Yes.
Awesome.
The American spelling, no E.
Yes. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much, Tracy, for being on the Circuit of Success podcast. This was very helpful. I know for me, I've got a lot of notes here, and you took some stress off me today. If I can't sleep,
Good.
that's okay. That's okay. We'll get through it, and but we'll just focus on the good stuff, which is the way we should be living anyway. But thanks so much, Tracy. Really appreciate your time, and best of luck to you on your journey.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.